an extra 5 minutes. But moderating this, longtime friend of the Food Policy Conference, had Jane Black here before, and she's got some really had some really hard-hitting articles and books over the years, and lately now I found a good podcast to listen to. There's nothing I like more than neglecting my work and parental duties and just listening to a podcast. Yeah, so Jay's got a fantastic one called Pressure Cooker. Particularly if you're a parent, it's a good one to check out. And I got my school lunch lady up here, Lola Bloom. You guys are in for a treat. So I'm gonna pass it over to Jane.
So
Thanks.
11:20 is when we're at?
We're gonna go to 11:20, okay. And then sorry, we're gonna cut into your break a little bit, but
we'll be good. Make it worth it, I promise. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. School lunch is one of my favorite topics. There's been a lot of talk at this conference about intractable issues and challenges and, problems and epidemics. And so in this session, we're going to try to talk about some positive things, some innovations, some successes. I feel that as we talk about school lunch, it will be inevitable that we will also talk about challenges. But we will try to focus on some good things that are happening and some models that people can take away. I will just set the scene for a second to say that when I first started covering school lunch, sort of into mid-aughts, 2006, 2007, sort of right before the Obamas came in, it was a big deal. A lot of the media, including me, were very focused on it. There was the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act. And since then, the spotlight has dissipated. I'm not quite as focused. The battles that we were having over nutrition continue. I think most of you probably saw last week that there was a push to have potatoes count as a whole grain somehow, which is interesting. So they're still going on, and we want to talk about all the things that have happened. So I want to start with just an opening question about what the most exciting things that you're seeing happen in school lunch are right now. And Donna, I wanted to start with you. I know you were going to talk about Universal. Oh, should I introduce you guys? Do you want to just, oh yeah, who are these people? Really quick, Lola Bloom, wellness consultant at DC Bilingual Public Charter School. Chris Derico, who is the president of the School Nutrition Association and also from Barber County, West Virginia. Donna Martin, who is a school nutrition consultant in Georgia and also the past president of the why can't I say this? Academy, thank you, of Nutrition and Dietetics, and Katie Wilson, Executive Director of the Urban School Food Alliance. So, okay, Donna, take it away.
Great, thank you. Well, during COVID, we were so excited to have universal school meals, and for 2 years, we got to have a really fun experiment where we saw how much it worked. We saw increased attendance, we saw increased academics, we saw increased healthy meals, we saw no meal debt, we had parents not having to worry about if their kids had food, we had kids saying that they didn't have to worry about packing their lunches in the morning. And so for 2 years, we reduced the stigma that surrounds free meals, and that it ended. So since then, we have seen a lot of states, state by state, enacting school meals. And so we're now up to 8 states that have enacted school meals. And guess what? They've seen healthier meals in the schools. They've seen increased participation. And the parents are really happy with it. But now we're seeing those states realizing the cost of it. They did not realize how wildly successful it was going to be and how much it was going to cost and how much the kids and families would love the meals that they were serving. So we know Nevada has already stopped doing universal school meals for next year, and other states are running out of money and are considering not doing it. So, we'd love to think that it could happen nationally, but we're not optimistic about it. So state by state is just kind of like a Band-Aid type thing. So what we're hoping for is more community eligibility to CEP, that we think that is the answer to working towards universal school meals, that may be inching up that multiplier that's 1.6, inching it up to like 2.5. If we could get it up to 2.5, we'd feed 9 million more kids. And so that is our hope. But universal school meals and healthy school meals for all is a win-win for everybody except the federal government.
Okay, so I told you it would not take long before we got to challenges. You go to success, and then you're all immediately at a challenge, which usually has to do with money. We are going to come back to CEP, but Chris, I know I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your big success, breakfast.
Well, I think with CEP being implemented several years ago, West Virginia is predominantly CEP. We do not have universal free from a state initiative. But I can tell you it's just a handful of schools in West Virginia that's not a CEP school.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second, just in case somebody doesn't know what CEP is? So it's the community eligibility provision. Can you just, I can explain it, or can you just explain to people what that is?
Yes, I can be brief.
Yes.
Basically, CEP is community eligibility provision. If a school district meets a certain criteria of students being directly certified, then the district can make the entire district free through this program. And in short, if they receive a higher reimbursement rate at the free rate, then obviously it's less cost to the district. Sometimes districts do agree to become CEP and take on more of the financial burden. Obviously, in West Virginia, we do have a high poverty rate, so there is a pretty good return on our investment to be CEP. So with my district going to CEP, and actually West Virginia predominantly going to CEP, we made a big push to go through trying to increase our breakfast participation. So trying to make sure we did some initiatives, whether that was breakfast in the classroom, grab-and-go initiatives, or anything else the school thought would be a benefit to them. In my district, and I've been in a couple different districts and seen the same production, I guess, is I've increased from 15% in one district, 25% in another district, all the way up to 70%. So once again, breakfast has increased, and I say it's twofold. It is because it is free, but it's also because of the initiatives that the district undertook. And that is something we've seen throughout West Virginia. Any of the districts that decide to be innovative and do some kind of innovative delivery system outside the standard system, breakfast participation has increased. And I believe my background's education, and I truly believe that breakfast, whether it's first thing in the morning, maybe it's after first period, is a key component to academic success.
So I want to talk a little bit about CEP. I mean, both of you suggested that it's sort of this workaround, which is often what happens in school lunch, to get to universal. And one of the great things about it is that it sort of takes away the whole administrative burden of deciding who's eligible and who's not, and lets you spend that money and that time on actual food and serving children, which is sort of where we want to get to. Katie, you, I'm sure, have seen CEP working in places that you work with, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you've seen and how it's worked, but also how we can push it further, take this success and take it further with the multiplier. Explain that to people.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and just like Chris said, the district has to invest. It's not a program. It's not universal free from the federal government. It's the district investing and paying for the kids that wouldn't normally qualify for free or reduced price meals. So the fact that they've said, okay, it used to be 40% of your population had to be impoverished. Now they've dropped that down to 25%, and that's wonderful, except the multiplier is still 1.6. So I represent the largest districts in the country, and for instance, LA Unified, now they're universal meals, so he can do it, but they couldn't go district-wide CEP. It would have cost them over $700,000 a year to pick up the rest of that cost. So this whole issue of this cost that the district has to invest, and if you hear other districts talking about the whole investment in education, just isn't there. If the district has to invest $700,000, that's teachers, that's buildings, that's science labs. So this whole idea of community eligibility is to really push the entire community to understand the value of school meals. And why we have to continue to battle this, it's interesting, because It does work. As Donna said about during COVID, it worked beautifully. We will tell you, educator after educator will say once kids eat breakfast, they do better at school, they do better in the classroom. We know that. Even breakfast in the classroom is a really good opportunity for people to increase their participation. You'll have educators fight that until they do it. And then once you get a champion in that building, the whole world wants to do it in that district because it's so successful and it has so many positive outcomes. But we continue to fight the issue of the value of school meals to a community. And we're talking about kids. So how do we, in the wealthiest, safest food supply in the world, country in the world, say we don't want to value children and give them a good start? Until we stop talking about it as this other thing and start saying that it is a tool for education, like Administrator Long spoke about, we won't move this dial because it's a continued battle. Some of us have been around a long time. I'm pushing 40 years in school meals. We've been battling this a long, long time. And we get the same response no matter who's in Congress. It turns over and we start all over again. But until, as a society, we decide to invest as an educational opportunity for kids, these programs will not succeed. But CEP is that inching forward as long as the district is willing to invest in it.
Is there, just before I move to Lola, is there any opportunity to change that? Explain what the multiplier is exactly for people, and then is there, what opportunities, whether legislative or lobbying or the USDA, do we have to change that?
Well, the multiplier, and it has to come from congressional, it's not something that USDA can change. They would if they could. But the multiplier tells you how much money you're going to get. You multiply that times your percentage, and it will give you the amount of money you're going to get to be able to run the federal program from the federal government. So you need that number to go a little bit higher if you're going to put the percentage of impoverished people lower. You've got to balance that out. So even before, when it was 40% at 1.6, it's still too costly. You had to have about 60 to 65% free and reduced in order to really make that program work or to break even. So even at 40%, it wasn't working very well. But it is somewhat an answer. But when they changed the rules and they said, okay, we'll give you 25%, that was a feel-good. That was Congress. That was not USDA. And we need to be very clear because people blame USDA. It was congressional. USDA cannot change those numbers. It has to be congressional. So that multiplier has to come up to make it even mean anything with 25%.
And is there any proposal out there to do that right now? I mean,
no, there isn't. I think it is, you have to push Congress to do it, to say that this is a program worth investing in. The outcome, the health outcome on the other end, of course, we know health disparities. We win when we feed all kids in schools. The other thing you can do is talk to local districts. Are local communities willing to invest? And it doesn't have to be necessarily the district. We have lots and lots of districts around this country that find other community members. Even banks have invested in school meals. So lots of other places that will help invest in school meals. But so communities particularly could do it if you want to push your community to invest in your school meals. But there's nothing right now to make that difference because it was a feel-good. We did this for school meals. But if you knew the logistics of it, the finances just aren't there to make it work.
Jane, if I can just emphasize what Katie was saying, that when students receive free meals, free breakfast and free lunch, whether it's through universal from the states, whether it's through CEP or additional funding from the district or local community, that goes a long way to making breakfast and lunch part of the school day, just as important as the math and the science curriculum. And that's a key component to these communities and the students. And once again, it's the first step, just making child nutrition an even playing ground with the curriculum. So.
Well, and I would like to also just add that we always say books are free, computers are free, teachers are free, busing is free. Why is school lunch not free? It is equally important. You cannot do it without it. You cannot teach hungry children. Why is it not?
So Lola, I want to, you work in a school here in DC. I would like you to tell us a little bit about your school and whether you use CEP or what you saw during the pandemic, and then I want to move on to grants, ask you a question about grants. But just tell us a little bit about what this was like on the ground the last couple of years and whether the things we've been talking about have made a difference.
Sure. So I was basically the food service director at DC Bilingual Public Charter School. It's a pre-K through 5th grade school here in DC, a charter school, and we have about 580 kids right now. During the beginning of the pandemic, being able to offer free meals, even though we were virtual, folks were coming and pick them up, and it was an incredible participation rate. And then coming back, eventually hybrid, and then eventually full-time in person, our participation rate maintained at quite a high level compared to before the pandemic. And then as soon as it was time to pay again, it dipped. We saw a bunch of folks coming in, bringing their lunch, or participating and not paying for their meals. And just so you know, we are a scratch prep school. We make all of our food in-house. We're a single site, and we're one of a few schools here in DC that do that. And the reason we became scratch prep was so that we were able to make wonderful, fresh, produce-forward meals for our students, make culturally relevant foods for our students, and be able to employ folks from our community in the kitchen making these wonderful foods. And, just seeing how the finances also have changed since the pandemic began. Everything's more expensive. It's not just the ingredients, it's also labor has gone up. Everything, and it's way up down the food chain, like the folks driving our trucks are getting paid more, and so the milk costs more, or the ingredients cost more. Access to equipment was reduced during the pandemic, so equipment fixes cost more. All those things went up in price, and yet the reimbursement levels were not proportionate to the actual increase in cost. So we're not a CEP school yet. We're about to become one. And I'm looking forward to that as someone who was managing all the admin and the menus and making sure employees showed up for work and, making sure children ate the food. I'm looking forward to hopefully a reduce in the administrative burden, but it's still a struggle to be able to create really amazing food for children with the restraints that we have. And one of the things that I've been really proud of during our time doing the scratch prep meals is being able to procure and access local foods, which is so important, not just to our local economies, but also providing ingredients that have the best flavor and teaching our children about the relationships of their food to their communities. And just, there's a lot of, I think, at the end of the day, food service directors are juggling a lot of balls here. We're trying to do so many things, and so any relief that we can get financially or policy-wise to making those things a little bit easier allow us to focus on what is really truly important, and that is that all the babies are able to eat and participate and thrive in the school environment. And so that's my day-to-day.
But I feel like, we can talk after this about sort of from scratch versus, semi-homemade or, purchase foods, and we should get into that because that's a big thing. But I think in a lot of people's minds, and certainly in parents who don't understand how the school lunch system works, they're like, oh, that's perfect. From scratch, locally sourced, that's what we're after. How did you do that? Because that's sort of the holy grail. Are there, in this time when we've seen, money flowing in a way that it hasn't, have there been grants that have helped you get that? What are they, and are they still available for other people to try to take advantage of?
Yeah. Well, so before I became a lunch lady, I was running a nonprofit here in DC, City Blossoms, which continues to exist and creates gardens with children and communities across the city. And the reason I bring that up is because I knew how to write a grant. And I knew also our local landscape I knew a lot of farmers, I knew a lot about farm to school. And those are two key pieces to being able to integrate local food into our school meals, which are, there's definitely professional development around that for for our school nutrition folks, but it's still like skills that people have to be able to have funding to acquire that training and take time off to be able to do those types of trainings. So I just want to say that, like, we do have wonderful grant support. Currently, we're working with Action for Healthy Kids, which has a grant through the USDA. It's a Healthy Meals Incentive Grant, and we're part of a cohort of many schools across the nation receiving some funding to help support our local food initiatives. But I think it's important also to realize that not every school nutrition director has access to that type of funding or the ability to write grants or support from their schools even to do that work. And I've been very fortunate that my school prioritizes food for our children, largely because we also feed the staff. And one of my big things has been, like, if the head of school isn't willing to eat our food, then we gotta step it up, because I want everyone at our school lining up to get a plate every day.
So Katie or Chris or any who've worked in, well, I know that you worked in big and small districts, but it's different depending on how big. Do you want to pick up on this idea of from scratch and grants and?
Well, what I will comment on, which deals with scratch a little bit, is farm-to-school initiatives. I really think that's one of the highlights of child nutrition programs right now. And yes, we could talk about the health benefits. It's local, fresh, a little more flavorful. But what I really like to talk about is the fact that we're helping the local small business. It was briefly mentioned, but education, a school district, we're in education, teaching children. We don't look at ourselves as being a business, but we are a business. And the more that we can purchase locally or in a region, then the more we are doing for the local economy. The other highlight about Farm to School is I try to give recognition to my local farmers. And that only creates a positive atmosphere for my parents, the greater community, for when the school district then needs their support for other initiatives that's occurring. So once again, Farm to School is something I think is very key and very important with child nutrition programs.
We had a very huge farm-to-school program, and I agree with everything you're saying, but what I want to mention about the scratch cooking, one of the largest issues is that many districts and schools around the country do not have kitchens, absolutely no kitchens. So how do you start a kitchen if you're going to do scratch cooking? It's probably $750,000 to equip a kitchen. So there's a lot of issues surrounding scratch cooking and the need for equipment. The other issues are staffing. If you're going to scratch cook, you need a lot more staff rather than just throwing something in the oven, heat and serve. And so staffing issues were like every other fast food place in town. Actually, I was competing with fast food restaurants. They were paying more than I was able to pay, and the work there is a lot easier than it is to come in my kitchen, where I had Cadillac kitchens, plenty of equipment, and we scratch cooked, but a lot of school districts do not have those opportunities, and so equipment and staffing are the biggest barriers in order to do scratch cooking.
I'll weigh in a little bit on that as well. And I ran a small school district for many, many years in rural Wisconsin, so we were doing this before it was popular. We had school gardens, and none of this is new. We were doing it in the 80s and 90s, so a lot of people think this is all brand new, but it's not. But anyway, on scratch cooking, and I did have a blog, and I will self-disclose the 4 shoulds of school nutrition, because everything lands in the school nutrition office. It is unbearable that all that responsibility comes onto somebody who's trying to make the program work. And I did say that scratch cooking was an elitist idea. And for us, it is, because a lot of our very poor schools have no money to be able to do this. And I'm absolutely in favor of scratch cooking. We love the Farm to School program, but I don't want to make people feel bad for feeding their children the best they can with what they have for resources. So I think we have to be really careful when we think about this. I think about our major city school districts. I'm going to pick on LA Unified, because we were just out there for an amazing program that they have started with local farmers. And they're doing more and more what they call speed scratch. So to get the ground beef already browned off or the chicken pre-cooked, that's okay. And they're making their own sauces and things like that. So it's all in this sort of perspective of what do you have for equipment. But they have all these local farmers that are really helping uplift all of this. But then you sit down and you listen to what does it take to put a fresh pear on a tray in any one of my major city districts the minute they think about a fresh pear being on the menu, and what that takes to put into these districts. New York is one of our districts, so feeding 1 million children. Do they want to put fresh fruit on the tray every day? They do. But the logistics of that can be unbelievable. So people have to kind of keep that in perspective. So for instance, in some of these districts that I represent, they might start a really big scratch cooking, farm to school work in maybe 100 of their districts, right? They have thousands of schools. They have thousands of schools in the district. So they're gradually working towards that. But like Donna said, I was in a school where they are literally serving 700 elementary school kids in a hallway. They put up tables for lunch in a hallway. They ship the food in. They put an oven in a closet that wasn't supposed to be. If the health department found out, they'd be in trouble. And here these cooks were walking above those kids with these trays of food, hot food. That's how they're serving kids in our school system. So we are all for all of this. It's very much very positive. Uplifting those communities and supporting those local communities, absolutely. There are some policy changes we could make to make that easier for schools to do, to uplift those communities and invest back in your own community. But I just want to caution people as we think about this image, this wonderful image we want to make. We're all for it. But the logistics of it, please check with your local school districts if you're going to get involved as to see what their resources are and what their facilities are.
So let me stop you because you said, first of all, I'm torn because I want to say, why is it so hard to put a pear on a tray? But I'm trying to focus on the positives. Tell me what those policy changes are. This is a policy conference that we could make to make that easier. Give me your top 3.
Well, let me really quick is, for instance, okay, farm to school, and we want to buy local. There's something, and there's some really good language USDA gave us on geographical preference, so that helps us when we bid. We have to bid. We have to have 3 price comparisons to buy food. And that's the grant that Administrator Long spoke about, that the Urban School Food Alliance just got a 3-year grant from USDA to work on procurement. Part of the problem is that the policies for food, for procurement, at the federal, state, and local level are not for food. They're for pencils, papers, desks, but food is thrown in there. So how do you buy really good food when you're working on the same procurement policy as when you buy desks and buses? Mm-hmm. It doesn't work the same. So we have something called micro-purchasing. Mm-hmm. So we have geographical preference we can use in our bids, but there's some state interpretation of some of that. So if I'm working with a local farmer and it's all working out really well, if my state decides to interpret that micro-purchasing means you can only use that vendor a couple of times before you have to find a new vendor, right. Well, it's the farmer in my community. How do I find a new farmer? Right. So it doesn't always click. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of policies and that we're looking at that, first of all, food has to, number one, not be the lowest price. Mm-hmm. That is not a federal policy. People keep thinking it is. You talk to any business official in a school district, and they'll tell you it's lowest price. That is not a federal rule. That is a local rule, if that's what they're doing. So how do you buy food at the lowest price? It doesn't make sense.
Katie, if I can just add, first of all, she made a very good point that one unique thing about child nutrition programs is they're all unique and face their own sort of challenges across the country, whether it's because of labor, whether it's because of financial, challenges with their kitchen setups. And that's why it's sometimes difficult when it comes to creating policies and procedures that's good for everyone. It's tough because every place is very unique, has their own sort of challenges. Even in West Virginia, district to district, it's very unique of how they operate and what their challenges are. And then to your question, Jane, what can we do? Here's the word I will use, and this is what Katie was saying in a different manner. We need simplicity. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I want to run good, solid programs of value, but when it comes to day-to-day operations, policies, and procedures, simplicity is the word that we need to keep in mind, because sometimes procuring a pear can be 3 days worth of work, and I don't have 3 days worth of work to get one piece of fruit on the table. So just keep that word in mind, simplicity.
So I will jump in here with just 1 second because I want to just emphasize what they're saying about how hard it is to create a policy when you've got so many different things. I did a story years and years and years ago which if it wasn't actually headline this is what it was in my head. It was a tale of two school districts, and it was up outside of Boston, and there were these two schools that were right across the street from each other, which was weird, but they were. And they had two different food service directors, and one was perfectly nice, but was essentially just like a box ticker. And one was someone who, whose whole life was all about this. And the food on the plates in the same district, in these, different schools, it was just totally different. So it really it's a question of, can you get those people in, and pay them what the going rate is, which is not enough. So I will stop talking and start asking questions. I wanted to move on to talk about some other different successes, one of which was summer EBT. She's so excited. Summer EBT from the pandemic, which is now apparently called Sunbucks, which I did not know. So Donna, start us out with, tell us what, for those who are not obsessed with school lunch policy, like those of us up here, what summer EBT was, what happened, and what you are doing to work on it.
Okay. Summer EBT is, as we know, as Administrator Long said, when summer's out, children are hungry, and hunger doesn't stop. So during COVID, most school districts were able to feed all the kids universally, and everybody was very creative with their summer meals program, and we did a great job of ensuring our kids were fed. But when all that ended, a lot of kids were left out and were not getting meals. So summer EBT has been enacted, and it's run state by state. So each state has to opt in if they offer to do summer EBT. And currently what happens with summer EBT is each child that qualifies for free lunch or is on Medicaid or SNAP or TANF or anything like that is eligible to get $40 a month or $120 a summer for summer EBT. So this summer, it has been enacted permanently that we'll have summer EBT, and starting this summer, we have 35 states who have opted into the program. The problem is some of the states don't opt in because they have to put money towards it. So the kids will get, a SNAP card, and they're able to do that. But the other side of that, can I talk about the other exciting thing that has really happened? So prior to COVID, we were feeding summer meals, and I'm in a large rural district, 836 square miles of nothing, and kids did not have transportation. They had no access to meals. Teachers were telling me they would put kids in summer school not because they were academically challenged, but because they were hungry. So we decided we needed to do something. So we were the first school district in the country, and this was like 15 years ago, that we ran 30 school buses all over the county. And we would get the kids to hop on the bus and eat a healthy school lunch, and then they would go back home. And that worked great until COVID hit. After COVID, the kids were no longer comfortable getting on the bus and eating. So at that point, USDA was allowing us to do non-congregate meals during COVID. And so the children were allowed to get on the bus and take the meals home and eat them at home. When all that ended, and we were then faced with having to feed kids, and they weren't interested in getting on the bus anymore, Congress allowed us to start doing, in rural areas only, non-congregate feeding. But the problem that hit after COVID was we didn't have bus drivers anymore, because all of our bus drivers decided they were going to drive tractor trailers because they were making a lot more money. So we didn't have enough bus drivers to run our routes anymore. We didn't have staff that wanted to work. Our staff was so burned out, and I think all of us can attest to that during COVID, my staff was the only one. We were the only ones coming in every single day working. Everybody else was at home Zooming or doing whatever. We were coming in. We were interacting with the public. We were having bus drivers exposed, getting COVID. Our workers getting COVID, and the health department would come in and say, you have to send your workers home in the kitchen. I said, we are essential workers. They're not going home. We've got to feed these kids. So we had to deal with all that. So we were, my staff finally just said, we can't do it anymore. So we were struggling to get staff and bus drivers, and food supply chain issues were still rampant. So USDA gave us this rural non-congregate option. So we are finally able to send a week's worth of food, breakfast and lunch, home to the kids once a week. So we have buses or pickups all over the country in rural areas where the kids or the parents can come pick up the meals for a whole week. You don't need as many bus drivers, you don't need as much staff, it's easier to fix the meals, and it is financially sustaining school nutrition programs. So the best thing about summer meals, I hate to say it, is that you can make some money financially, and that helps school districts during the year when they're losing money on breakfast and lunch. It allows them to make it through the year. So the great thing about summer feeding is you can use all the farmer stuff. So the farmers called and said, I have pears, I have blueberries, I have strawberries, I have cantaloupes. We could provide all that food. I was sending home watermelons to the families. Those kids were so excited when they came to the bus and we handed them this big box of food and a watermelon. It was supposed to be individual watermelons. They were this big. But the kids' eyes were just so lit up. But we knew that those kids would not suffer an academic slide over the summer, that they were going to have healthy food. And it's not enough to just feed kids. Food is not food. It has to be healthy food. And that's the difference with summer feeding and the rural non-congregate option. What is disappointing is our large cities, and there are gangs in the cities, and they're not allowed to do the non-congregate feeding. Those kids still have to come to a site and eat on site and are not allowed to take the food home. So we have lots of issues around the country where kids cannot make it to the sites. They have to cross an expressway. They don't have transportation. So for the rural areas, it has been the biggest blessing, and our rural kids are really getting fed well. But we need this to be expanded to allow all the children to have the non-congregate option.
Let's get a round of applause for watermelons. Chris or Katie, or you want to jump in on summer EBT? Any additional?
Well, I'll just comment this. I think the summer EBT is what you hear about most frequently in the media right now. But I'm with Donna. I think the more exciting piece is the fact that in rural districts, we are able to do the non-congregate feeding. This will be the second year where this has been an option. And I think you will see more rural districts take advantage of this year as we understand it better, understand the rules surrounding it. I am an example where I did not participate last year, but plans are in place to do non-congregate feeding in my district. And we're expecting a very large turnout from parents and students to pick up these meals because we know the need is there, and we're actually excited about it. And I think fast forward to another year, you'll see even more districts, once they see how this is working and the success of the programs near me across the country, then other districts will pick up on this and participate. There's a handful, maybe it's 2 handfuls in West Virginia that would be doing non-congregate this year. And once again, I do think you're going to see that expand as they see what happens in our districts and so forth. So I think that's the most exciting piece, because the challenge has always been, as Donna said, we had sites, we had lots of sites, but if students just couldn't get there, and that was always a challenge, the only people that ate those sites was the captive audience of whatever program, academic program or otherwise was happening. So there was a lot of needy students left out. This will now help many, many students and parents, I believe, throughout the summer.
And so for us in the large urban districts, we need policy change. We need non-congregate as desperately as the urban, as the rural districts have it. My districts have so many challenges with, like Donna said, transportation, gang activity, parents that are working. Technically, are their kids supposed to be home alone? No, but they have no choice. They're working parents. Again, I hate to have programs that then sort of penalize parents that are really trying to do the best they can. And so our programs are desperately in need of non-congregate feeding in the urban areas as well. And as far as we call it Sunbucks now, as Administrator Long said, for that summer card, certainly that is helping students get access to food. Our challenge is we need them to come and get our food because we need to keep our programs viable. And so if there's that alternative, yes, there are a lot of folks that maybe that potentially is definitely getting kids food, and we certainly hope that, and we're for every program that allows families to get food. But we want to make sure that it's not a replacement for our programs in the summer, because our programs are enrichment programs as well. Even non-congregate feeding, you're still having a contact with someone from your district. So they're kind of checking on the welfare. When I was with USDA as Deputy Undersecretary, I went and visited summer programs, and a lot of times there were superintendents there. And I asked the superintendent, why are you at the program, even to pick up food, when families were just picking up food? And almost every superintendent said, because I'm checking on the welfare of certain children. If they're not picking up this food, I want to know why. And so school districts, whether it's the bus driver or the school nutrition employees, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not into lunch ladies. I'm not a lunch lady. I want to raise the bar to professionalism in this program, so it's a school nutrition professional or school nutrition employee. And so if you're in contact with that school nutrition employee, they know their kids. And if there are kids not picking up that box of food, they're going to come back and tell you something's wrong, and somebody then can go check on the welfare of that child. So once again, it's not just about food, like Donna said. It's about the whole child and caring about the community of children that we are supposed to be overseeing.
Do you want to go ahead with DC experience? Just go ahead. Oh, sorry. I wanted Lola just to tell us about
Sure.
DC.
No, I mean, in terms of DC, we have a summer meals program. I haven't been put in touch with the summer EBT program here yet, but I don't know. I was just listening here and just thinking, like what Katie just said about how a lot of times when we think about school food, we're just thinking about the children and how they need food to be in school and to learn, but really we're the linchpin, I think, into communities and what it's necessary for food justice in our communities in terms of access, not just to the children, but to the families, and understanding how it all is connected to the well-being of our communities. And so I just really appreciate what you had to say there, because I think sometimes we get pigeonholed as just this one little department that needs a certain amount of funding, but it's so key to the health of the broader picture, and so I appreciate that.
So this is the perfect pivot to my next question. We're going to do 2 more questions, and then I'm going to open the floor to you to ask your questions. But one of the things that we were discussing, and as we prepared for this panel, was kind of the lack of understanding, even in schools, about how important school food is. That there is, I think Katie or Donna, I'm not sure, alluded to this idea that everybody cares about English, everybody cares about math, but nobody cares about food. And there were 2 great stories. So one of the things I wanted to focus on is, how do you make that clear to stakeholders, as people like to call them? And so Donna has a great story that I really want her to tell, and so does Chris, and then we'll wrap up and open for questions.
So the head football coach came to me one day and said, Donna, I have malnourished athletes. I said, excuse me? And he said, I took 3 of my football players to the Medical College of Georgia, and they said they are malnourished. They're not getting enough calories, they're not getting enough nutrition, and what can we do about it? And I said, there's this new program that USDA just opened up. It's called Supper. And I said, I've got to ask the board for approval, but if you'll go with me, we'll see if they'll approve and let us start it. So he went with me, and they said, sure, that sounds great. So we started feeding our athletes supper. We won our first ever state football championship. And CBS News happened to be in our county doing a story on that we had the poorest children in the whole country. And they went and filmed the state football championship and came back and talked to the coach. And he credited the school nutrition program with the win. He said that had it not been for school nutrition. So it's not just academics. And for my poor children, one of the reasons our athletes stayed in school and did well in school is they wanted to play football. They were hoping to get football scholarships to colleges and stuff. So the food does much, much more than just nourish them academically. It nourished them to keep them in school, and it had them coming, and it had them winning state football championships. And in the South, that's a pretty big deal. Friday nights, you don't play in anything because everybody's at the football game. So they had a sign on the bank saying Friday night when we were going to the state championship, the last person out of the county turned out the lights, and that was exactly what it was like. So I take that to congressmen, because a lot of men, I'm sorry men, but you don't understand hungry children, but they understand football. So that's a great story. When I talk to them about, I send them the videotape with the coach talking about the football team and how important nutrition is, and he was our biggest supporter. He wanted to know when those boys were not eating breakfast and not eating lunch, and so I had to give him reports on when they ate breakfast and when they ate lunch. And having the football team eat makes a lot of other people come and eat too, so it's a win-win.
And I will say, probably you went by it quickly, but having him come and ask for the supper program, like they would, if you had gone in and said, we need a supper program, they would have said,
right.
But
so when I asked, I said I needed some extra help, and that's the key to offering supper, is you need extra help. And so I said, you've got to give me a person to do it. And, they'll do, the football coach is the most powerful person in my community. So having him on my side, I could get anything I wanted. I just took him with me. And he loved us, because we sent home, when they'd go to a football game, we were able to send meals for them to eat on the way home. So they weren't stopping at fast food and spending the money they didn't have. They were eating healthy, nutritious meals with milk and fruits and vegetables and healthy food. And he really got it. So we did carb loading on Wednesday night. We did our meals based on the football team, so it was cool.
and Chris has a good story too.
Well, I'll try to maybe summarize a couple points with this story. First of all, I'm an educator. I was a teacher, principal, and often child nutrition has a hard time maybe having a place at the table. Obviously, principals, teachers are worried about math, English, all the other subjects, and child nutrition is that interruption to the day. Like we've said, we think child nutrition needs to be part of the day, not that interruption. And the one time that we become part of the day is when it comes to state testing time. And that's when teachers or school administrators, principals, really want to make sure they get that breakfast, or we're providing a snack mid-morning in between testing and so forth. So I try to use that story to make sure I'm at the table not only that 1 or 2 days out of the year, but all 180 school days out of the year. Because, yes, I want them to perform well on those tests, but I also want to make sure they're performing well each and every day and have the nutrition they need to perform well every day and grow up and be productive citizens of this country.
You can tell us your 2-week trial story.
Oh, I forgot that story. So real quick, back to my breakfast initiative, and I didn't tell you this story, but my younger brother, not as good looking, but younger brother, he was the principal of the local high school. I convinced him to do breakfast after first period and in the classroom, and he did agree to do it. He also told me later that he thought he could do this for 2 weeks, have a little trial period, and then forget about it, and just please me. What happened was, at his school, 15% of the students ate breakfast prior to us trying this, and it did jump to 70%. And I'll be honest with you, he came to me and said, oh, hell, I can't end this now. So, and obviously what I did was I used that data then to spread it to my other schools in the district, because obviously if he could go from 15 to 70%, you're going to see that increase or similar increase in the other schools. And eventually we did do breakfast in the classroom district-wide.
So very inspiring stories. We have about 10 minutes left. Anybody want to ask our illustrious panel a question? Don't be shy. Someone's coming out. Jerry's coming. Someone else. We got 2 questions. Great. Bring it.
Yes. I'm Jerry Hagstrom from the Hagstrom Report. When you're talking about summer EBT and you're talking about this congregate and non-congregate feeding, could you tell me how these work together or don't work together? Can the kids get both? If they're getting these $40 a month, do they need to go to congregate feeding? I mean, I know you say it for the sake of your program that they do. So I asked that. And then the second thing is, We've seen a decline in school meal participation in the last year. Do you blame that solely on the end of free meals, or are there any other factors? And in that context, how do you view the new rule coming out? Is this going to make school lunches less attractive to children?
So I'll chime in here real quick. Okay, so, and we call it sunbucks. I love that new term. Again, it's that whole stigma thing, right? So sunbucks, how fun is that? So we want it to work in partnership with summer meals. There are children that absolutely can't get to summer meals. They can't even go to pick up the food. And that's what that program is really all about, is to really make sure that all kids in America get access to food. So some order their food from Amazon. It's delivered to their homes. Others, the guardian or parent go grocery shopping, and they can use that to buy that little bit of extra food. And $40 a month, folks, that's not very much money, right? So what do you buy? But you can buy the extra food so that those children have food at home if again, the parents are working and children are trying to function through summer. So we really are, and we're working on it. It was rolled out very fast during pandemic EBT, so there were some struggles. States had struggles getting it up and running. So we're trying to work through these issues to make sure that it's in partnership. But all children are always welcome to a summer site, whether they're on sunbucks or not. They're always welcome to a summer site. As far as the new nutrition regulations are concerned, on behalf of the Urban School Food Alliance, we are always in favor of moving forward with nutrition standards. We believe in strong nutrition standards. Yes, there are times we need to slow it down a little bit, back it off. Technical assistance is what's needed. We know that at the end of the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act, 99% of the districts were conforming to the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act nutrition standards. Was there a dip and then it came back? Yes, participation rates did come back. There are a lot of studies that show that kids want good, healthy food. Has the commercial palate caught up to what we're doing in schools? Not so quick. So we know there needs to be more time. We appreciate the way USDA proposed the new standards, that there will be a much longer period of time to gradually get there. And is there a tipping point where we need to say, okay, we're here, let us stay here for a while? We believe there is. But we will always stand for strong nutrition standards. And I don't believe that good nutrition standards keep kids away from good food, because the food is out there, and the manufacturers have come up with some really amazing food. Scratch cooking, farm to school, all gets you to those nutrition standards. Our districts at the Urban School Food Alliance didn't even ask for menu waivers during COVID. They were at the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act Target 2 for sodium and all the other issues. We came together and we solved problems to stay with that meal pattern. But we definitely believe we need to lower sugar in breakfast. So we're going forward.
Just to add about the summer, so yes, a student can participate in the sunbucks and pick up meals from the non-congregate setting. Something that wasn't mentioned was in my district, I'm also having a congregate setting, and that's because I have some academic programs going on. So a challenge is you are not allowed to do non-congregate in the same area that you have a congregate setting. And what's negative for me with that is my congregate setting is going to feed maybe 25 kids a day. So very few. So obviously I wanted to work through the hurdles of making sure I was reaching the rest of my district through the non-congregate, and I did have to work through some of that. I'll be honest with you, where I'm distributing is not probably the prime locations I'd like to distribute. So we're going to see what happens this summer, evaluate it, see if there's somehow we could do things better. But there is that challenge. If you have a congregate setting, you're not allowed to have a non-congregate setting in the same area. So
All back to policy, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Dr. Ashley Johnson. I'm a veterinarian and director of food policy with the National Pork Producers Council. And thank you all for your work on school lunches, breakfast, all these meals that you're talking about. It's not only important for me professionally, but also personally, as my husband is an educator, also a basketball coach, also a football coach, and he's from Macon, Georgia, so you'd have a lot to talk about. He gets feeding kids, and he knows how important it is, and especially as an educator, he is responsible for students with special needs services. And so every single morning, he goes to school earlier than all the other teachers, meets his kids, gets them off the bus because they need that extra help, and they need the extra time to go pick up their meals, and he has them eat breakfast every single morning in his classroom. He sees the difference in these children, and not only their performance, their attention, but incredibly their behaviors with these students. And a lot of people don't think about that as well. But he also has noticed something over his years as an educator of the quality also of breakfast and what is offered and how that affects these children, especially with their behaviors. And so he sees if they have a higher protein, a very, good protein heavy kind of breakfast that allows them to stay full longer, allows them to be able to have that attention. Because they track these things as educators for their IEP, for their individual education plan. He tracks these behaviors. So they have the data within their school to show what that effect actually has with these children. So my question to you guys is, how can we make sure that school breakfast especially has more offerings of higher protein and good quality protein added into that nutritional plan for students, and what solutions can you provide for us?
I mean, I just want to say real quick, as a small school, we have less purchasing power than like a large district. But when we plan our menu, we have to be careful about protein. Protein is an option for school breakfast. So you do not have to serve it every single day, but we have to be, because it is so expensive, we have to be careful about it. So I think it does come down to funding. And it's also, we have different ways of providing protein. We do turkey sausage and stuff like that, but we also, we're a majority Latino school. So we have a day that's frijoles and tortilla and plátanos, which is a different way. It's a plant-based protein, So there's ways to get around, and provide more options, but it is the most expensive thing on the plate for sure, and that's why I think we do see so many high carb, high sugar options in breakfast, which I'm sure is what we're trying to work to reduce.
That's a great question. We're hoping USDA is going to change the regs. We're hoping with this new meal standards that come out. That's something we've commented on. Right now, the standards are you have to serve 2 grains at breakfast, with the option of one of those grains being a meat alternate. So, which means you could not serve like an egg omelet, which would be a high quality meat protein, very inexpensive, but it's 2 meats. And with that, you'd have to add a grain into it. So I think we've got our fingers crossed that with these new standards coming out, that they're going to allow us to do 2 meat alternates at breakfast and give us some flexibility there. But right now, we don't have that flexibility. And I do think that a lot of the meat offerings are high in sodium. And so that's going to be an issue. And so we're relying on manufacturers to work with us to bring the sodium content down on the meat, because a lot of sausage and cheese and things like that at breakfast are, a lot of the pizza items that have, the pepperoni and things like that on them are high in sodium.
Well, and I think that's a policy issue as well, Donna, because we used to be able to have the grains and the proteins, and you could do 2 grains, 2 proteins, or a protein and a grain, and you could count them as the meal components, and that's too much in the weeds because that's how you get your reimbursement per meal. That all changed with the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. They did have protein in the breakfast, but there was such a pushback from the industry, from the folks in the industry that said, we can't do all of this, and it's too expensive and all that kind of stuff. So we changed it, and then now you have to serve all your grain components for the week before you can even use protein as one of the meal components. So technically, you can't even use it as part of your breakfast component unless you've served all the grain components first. So it gets very complicated. But so we're hoping, and it is in the new proposal, that we go back to being an alternate. You can if you choose to, you don't have to. Now, USDA foods, we have opportunity to access 200 and some wonderful USDA foods, and they've done a lot of work to lower the sodium, and a lot of those protein items are in there, so that does cut your cost because those are entitlement dollars that you can spend, and those items are really conscious about sodium and things like that. So hopefully we're going to go back to that, but I appreciate your husband's concern over that because it is a serious issue.
One thing to add is, in a little different perspective, is it's very important that districts, schools allow time for students to eat breakfast and lunch. Just like us, if we're eating on the go, trying to eat quickly, obviously the quality of the nutrition of that food goes down. So that's also a challenge in schools, is we need time for students to eat breakfast and lunch.
That's right.
So I was hoping we were going to be able to wrap up with a rallying cry for a national campaign for the importance of school lunch, but we are out of time. I think we have shown you some successes. We've definitely shown you some complications. It's real complicated, but we're making progress, so thank you for being with us, everybody.
Thanks, Jane. Wow, what an inspiring panel. Like, I teared up a couple times. Just listening to you guys are doing such inspiring work. Let's give them another round of applause. Yeah, thank you. That's great. So we're gonna